Hello, my name's John Altman. I'm one of the baseball coaches at Papillion La Vista South. My role at Papio South is head JV coach, and my area of expertise is primarily working with our pitchers. Today I'm going to give a brief breakdown of Grayson and Wallace's pitching mechanics. We'll talk about our pitching philosophies at Papio South, and we'll give you some ideas of things to focus on throughout the off-season in preparation for next year. When we look at pitcher's video, we primarily focus on their hips and lower half, especially early in the delivery, because we believe that if we can get the first few steps right, the rest of the delivery mostly takes care of itself. All right, so this is video that we collected during our Titan baseball camp in early June. I've also got some video here of Marcus Stroman on the left, and we'll use him kind of as an example to give a crash course on mechanics before we get into Grayson's video. Okay, so to keep things simple, the pitch and delivery can be broken down into 5 main steps. Hip load, all right, that's leg lift, hip lead, hip separation, and then release and follow through. Okay, we spend most of our time on hip load and hip lead because we believe that if we can get those 2 steps right, then everything else is a result of that and follows correctly. All right, if we struggle with these first 2 steps, then everything else can be a struggle as well and can lead to a lot of other mechanical issues. All right, so I'm going to start by just kind of giving you a crash course on what each of those phases are, what they should look like, how they should feel, and then we'll look at Grayson's video. So first is hip load. So hip load is during leg lift until we get to the top. Basically what we're doing is we're setting our hips up to move down the mound. Okay, what I look for here is I want to see a strong back leg. Okay, it can be a little bent, doesn't have to be perfectly straight. We don't want it too bent, but we want it to be able to support our body. Okay, I want to see that leg lift towards the back ear or back shoulder. Okay, I don't want it to rotate too far back towards second base. I don't want it to go too much straight up and down. All right, I'm looking at the hips. Okay, so for the hips, I want to see your front hip pocket point a little bit towards second. So basically, or towards home. So I'm looking for a little bit of counter rotation in those hips where they twist just a little bit. And I want to see that front hip elevate slightly compared to the back hip. Okay, this sets our hips up in a good spot for as we move down the mound in order for us to rotate efficiently into front foot strike. Okay, so that's hip load. All right, next phase is hip lead. Okay, so during hip lead, we want to see the hips move us down the mound first. And I want to see that front hip stay elevated, and I want to see the front shoulder match the plane of the hips for as long as possible into front foot strike. Okay, so as a result, the trunk should stay stacked above the hips. Okay, from here, I also want to pay attention to the back leg. Okay, so the knee should stay hovered over that back foot, and the hip should sit back behind the heel. All right, this allows us to use our glute muscles. It allows us to rotate more effectively and get our body into the throw. Okay, so that's hip lead. If we can get that right, then typically hip separation follows correctly. Okay, so hip to shoulder separation is where the front hip is pointed towards home, the chest is pointed towards third, and then the arm is cocked at 90 degrees. Okay, this is not something that we can really train as well, all right, because it has a direct correlation with how well our hip load leads into our hip lead, which allows for good hip to shoulder separation. So we don't really teach hip to shoulder separation because it's created as a result of everything else being right. And then from there we have release and follow through, okay, which we spend very little time on because it's all, again, a result of how everything else is working earlier in the delivery. Okay, so from here, let's just take a look at what Grayson's got going on. Okay, I'm going to go through his delivery slowly here. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. So first, hip load. All right, so we come set. We go into our leg lift. All right, now the leg lift, the height of the leg lift to me isn't super important as long as we're able to get our hips in a good position. Okay, you can see here when he gets to the top of his leg lift, he doesn't really get any elevation of that front side. And he's not really getting any of the corkscrew action that we talked about with Stroman. All right, where that front hip closes off just a little bit. So I'd like to see a little bit more rotation here with the hips. We don't want to go too far where his legs, everything is pointed, rotating all the way towards second base. All right, it's just a little bit of counter rotation in those hips. Okay, so because we don't get much of a hip load, everything kind of goes down the mound at the same time, which means we don't really get any hip lead either. So if you watch his front leg, it goes down, and then from here you can see that his front leg just steps down the mound. So he's not really getting anything from his back leg, from his backside. All right, his hips and shoulders are kind of moving together rather than his hips going down the mound first. All right, and so because of that, when he lands into front foot strike, he doesn't really get much hip to shoulder separation, if any. All right, both his chest and his hips are towards the camera. Whereas if he had a good hip load and hip lead, all right, his hips would rotate open, his chest would stay closed. And so a lot of this is a result of poor hip load into poor hip lead, and so then it follows that we have poor hip shoulder separation. And so from here, basically all we can do is throw all arm. All right, so the big thing that Grayson needs to focus on is getting this hip load and hip lead right, and then a lot of the rest of his issues will take care of themselves. All right. Those are the main things that I have for Grayson to work on to start. Okay, don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions about this video, if you're curious on drills or things that we could do to help make some of these mechanical changes. I do give pitching lessons for anyone who's interested in the off season, and you can reach me at 402-806-1723. Like I said, I'm an open book. I always enjoy talking baseball and pitching. Thank you, and go Titans.